So thanks so much for for the invite to be here. I'm really honored. And although I was, it's always hard to wake up at certain times. It was very exciting. Exciting moment. And when I came on Zoom, I was definitely convinced about my choice because we've been hearing a lot about the US in these last weeks, and it's actually great to see the real, change makers and the real people doing, the work. So beyond all what media feed us. So thank you for what you're doing, first of all, in your own organization. Um, so the summit is called Repair Economy, but I just thought that I'm really bad at title, but I thought that was a bit more provoking calling it Beyond Repairing, because I feel that when we talk about repairing, we always sit a step backward the current system and the status quo. So I think where I would like to bring you today is a bit to push those boundaries and how can we innovate and how can we push the system forward or give it a different shape. So I might just start with how can we create an unsustainable economy, an unsustainable society, where we can grow consumption per capita in general. That's done, especially in developed rich countries. We can abuse or use or abuse mineral resources. That's done. We can overuse soils and stock of fish and forests. That's done. We can obviously pollute water and rivers and oceans. That's done as well. So we can see that, inequality, you probably can see it in your own country. We have still a hunger problem around the world, but we are also having an obesity problem, showing, how imbalanced is the current system. We have unemployment still around countries, but we also have, especially in Europe, for example, a working poor class, right? People having 3, 4, 5 jobs and still struggling. I might not focus too much on the risk of pandemic because we're all being hit this year, and obviously discrimination are still around. So if that was our agenda, I think that we are pretty well on track, and I don't want to focus too much on this because obviously data and literature around all these problems have been around for a long time. But the good thing is that a lot of those activities actually increase GDP. So currently, our economic system, which is based on economic growth, is measured with the gross domestic product. And I think that it's important for those who are not aware of what GDP is, or those who forget what GDP is or how we use it. So basically, to refresh a little bit how our economy, our prosperity is actually measured. So GDP measures all, the monetary transaction when we sell or buy a service, but it leaves out a lot of non-monetary transactions. So for example, the caring work, all the volunteering work that you're doing is not actually contributing to the economy as intended nowadays. It doesn't give any information about the distribution of wealth, and it surely doesn't give information about social and ecological well-being. A standing forest doesn't increase GDP, but if we cut it and transform it into furniture, then that increases GDP. And I always like to provoke again a little bit, saying, well, if your economy is not growing, maybe you have to get sick, you have to go to war, you can have a car accident, or so on and so forth. So when we understand how absurd is our economic system, then we can probably start acting on it, right? And this is really important, especially in this time of crisis, because we're going to hear a lot in the media or politicians say, oh, we need to restart economic growth, we need to aim for economic growth, but economic growth doesn't translate in economic well-being always. So said that, I will point out that economic growth is the problem of our current social and ecological crisis. And in a lot of places, it still remains a taboo to talk about it. Economic growth is always fueled by capitalism, which is the search for continuous accumulation of capital. And this capital is raised by the production of commodities. And the problem is that there is no enough to this system, there is no enough to production of commodities or capital growth. And And this brings us, to all these market strategies that have been put in place to actually fuel even more these current systems. So obviously you're all into the makerspace, repair cafe and stuff. You might have heard about planned obsolescence, but companies and designers in those companies are asked to design products so that they can break down as soon as possible, so that people have to replace them. And obviously that increases profits of the private companies, but it comes with a big ecological burden, because obviously every time we produce something, we need resources for those items. Every year, the UN published that we are producing 50 million of tons of e-waste, and just 12% is formally recycled. And it's really interesting, because if you look into e-waste data from the UN or other sources, we always talk about the e-waste, the end of life cycle of those products. But let's remember that even if 100% of those items or those materials are recycled, we're still injecting, energy in the system. We're still, needing all this entropy to make that system work. So really recycling is the last step that we have to think about. There are a lot of degrowth intellectuals that point out that the global economy produces not to fulfill human needs anymore, but it produces a commodity that needs to be sold, as I said before. And if we really think about it, there's nothing that suggests that our needs are unlimited and infinite. In fact, they are socially constructed. Well, said that, again, Patel is a very famous economist from the UK, and even, mainstream economists, they agree that the current economic system based on growth, well, in this case, Patel says, has turned humankind into an agent of extinction. So that was in a nutshell what the problem of our global society are. And for me, I came to that after a really long journey. I started to do, environmental activism and being concerned about social environmental issues when I was 14. And I realized I couldn't focus anymore on one topic or the other. What about refugees or deforestation or ocean acidification? And when I looked further into it, well, I think we really need to think and change the root of the problem. So here I put a triangle, an inverted triangle, showing the macro, the meso, and the micro level. And today we'll touch a little bit about that macro level and the meso level, which is where you all fit in, right? The community level. And for me, communities are the real agent of change. So we hear a lot about individual, choices. We have to switch off the light and do, purchase organic food, etc., etc. But the reality is that I feel we are putting too much burden on individuals, because obviously we have, a bigger system pushing us forward, right? We have working commitment, we have family commitment, we have to pay rent. So in the current system, it's really hard to ask individuals to make their own bread and their own shampoo and cycle everywhere and be part of a tool library and so on. So I think that the system, the neoliberal system, keep giving a lot of responsibilities to individuals. And then if individuals feels overwhelmed, and probably that's why we're not actually acting on these issues, because we can't as individuals. And as soon as we shift away from that, and the other thing that usually people think, is like, then we need a top-down approach, but we can see that top-down approaches don't always work, and big democracy or big systems are too slow to change, or they might have other obstacles. So I really stress that communities are the real agent of change, and I will explain how and why I see that in a second. So if economic growth is the problem, so what's the alternative? The literature is extensive and is actually growing more and more. And today I wanted to introduce you to the concepts of economic degrowth, or for those that want to be more politically correct, they call it economic post-growth. So it has a more positive connotation. What is economic degrowth? Well, it's basically, a voluntary and equitable downscaling of production and consumption that increases human well-being and enhances ecological condition at the local and global level in short and long term. And that voluntary is really important, because that means that it shouldn't come, as imposed as an austerity measure. It should be pre-planned and started by people. Samuel Alexander, another intellectual based here in Australia, in Melbourne, he defined it as a planned contraction of the energy and resource demands of the overgrown economies. And I really would like to highlight that, because another important thing for me is to shift away from any imperialistic discourse saying, oh, everyone has to do this. No, I'm referring, with contracting the economy and the metabolism of the economy, I'm referring to our economies, which are the global north countries that have been using a lot of per capita resources until nowadays. So as Samuel Alexander goes on, pointing out that we need social justice, ecological viability, and human flourishing beyond consumerism and productivism. So at the Tool Library here in Brisbane, that I founded in 2017, we have those, goals that obviously, they don't aim to change the entire economy, but they try to fit in within that change. We want to obviously create a sustainable society from an environmental point of view, and we really stress on the idea of decreasing consumption and not just waste, because as I said, once we get to that waste part, we've already lost the fight. We want to provide access to specialized tools, so a bit changing the understanding or the culture about access and ownership. We would like, and we're not there yet, to employ people from disadvantaged background and create social stability. And I think, for a long-term sustainable change, we do need social stability in terms of also employment. And finally, we would like to move toward a sharing, a circular economy. I'm using a bit of those buzzwords, but for a degrowth society. How are we doing this? So at the beginning, when I started, at the beginning was really just me and my partner that was forced to drive around Brisbane with me to pick up stuff from people's houses. I really started just with a website and a Facebook page. So as you can see, from roller skater to food dehydrators to tools, that was a bit how we used to receive the items. And over the years, we got much more structured. So for example, in this picture, you can see, and it's one pickup of just one afternoon. So what we are doing now is that we actually drive to the 4 Brisbane recovery centers, which are basically the landfill stations, and every 2-3 weeks. And we have there a bin for us, and we partner with the Brisbane City Council. So people that go to the landfill station, they can put stuff into recycling. They have batteries, they have general waste. And there's also been for our Brisbane Tool Library where they can put in power tools. So it gives a bit of more structure in the collection of things. Well, the scary thing is that if you look at this picture, some stuff are brand new, and yeah, they come with the instruction, with the boxes and stuff. So this is where, this is the waste that our society creates. And I feel when we talk about waste, we are so disconnected from that we might think, oh, composting things, or these really broken thing, but actually we receive brand new things. And the thing is, those items don't come just from private people. We also partner with removal companies. And I would suggest you to look into that if in your cities or villages is a thing, because removal companies, their goal is they receive calls from customers. They have to empty shops, restaurants, houses, and so on. They bring it to landfill, and then they go to the next customer. So we found 1-800 Got Junk and Little Miss Organized, which are 2 businesses that actually took the time with their employee to sort out the good things and then donate them to us. So again, in that way, you can filter and receive some quality things that are not really waste. So here are other just pictures of how donation comes in. As you hear up downstairs, down in the slide, I'm in a landfill station, and I actually went with those removal companies to see what they were throwing away. Then in Australia, we used to have, actually they just cancelled it, the curbside collection, which means there's a month in which every suburb can put the waste out on the footpath, and Brisbane City Council passes and collects it. So we used to go around streets again to see if there was anything valuable in there, but that was really at the beginning, because again, it's not very efficient, especially, you know, in terms of human capital. So our structured way of receiving donation proves a better model. As you might all do, when we receive everything, we have to clean everything. And the other step that is really time consuming and a bottleneck for us that you might not have in the US and in Canada is that we have to test and tag every single item every time. So test and tagging means that we are checking that the electrical appliance doesn't explode, basically, and doesn't kill anyone. So we have to be certified for that. So our volunteers, we paid for some certification, and I did it myself. But every time an item goes out and back, we have to do that. So that is a really long process to do it. Here you can see a bit of our operation. We have front desk, pickups and stuff. So I'm sure that some of you might have bigger tool libraries or with a longer history. As you know, we have tools, but we also have other things. And I find really interesting because we are actually looking for a second location, but it's really nice to see how tool library shapes around community resilience. You know, if we like where we are now is getting really gentrified. So we are having more and more camping gear and other items, Christmas decoration and stuff, because people are living more and more in apartments, while in the suburbs, they might need more and more gardening tools. So it's really important for us to see, you know, that there isn't one model that fits all scenarios, but tool libraries really are resilient to community needs. Here, a little bit of a summary of our model. So on the left here, we have Cleanaway, which is a waste management company. Brisbane City Council is our council, the two removal companies said. So we receive all these influx of donation. We try in this circular way to maximize the use of those items. And when those items are broken, or we can't use them anymore. So the law in Queensland, which is the state I live in, is really strict around electrical appliances. So from test and tagging down to we can't actually repair electrical appliances if we are not electricians. And so, you know, that is another certification as well, a much longer one. So when we can't repair them, we send them to another social enterprise called Substation 33, and they open up the e-waste and create new things. So obviously, you know, you can't repair something that potentially could work again, but then you can open it up and make stuff out of it, which looks to me very dangerous anyway. But anyway, that's how the law works. And then what we don't want or we don't need, or when we see that other organizations might use them or maximize the use more than us, we then try to seek other organizations. For example, we received a lot of sleeping bags, but for us, you know, washing them, maintaining them for camping is too much of an hassle problem. So we actually gave them to some homeless organizations so that they can actually use them. So it's really interesting, you know, because it's not about, as we will see later, it's not about the things, it's about the connection that you know, we're pushed to find through the items that we receive. So our space where we are currently located has been also built all with reused material, reclaimed materials. Again, here pictures of shelvings that were going to landfill. Again, businesses, they have to change shelvings, they have different products, and everything goes to landfill. So here we have our volunteers, Samantha and Kevin, that rescued those materials and built the inside. And since 2018, we are based into the state library. So the public library, it's a state government building. So in Brisbane, we have public libraries of city councils and then state library of the state. So two type of public library, we're in the state one. And why it's interesting for us and important. So the space is big enough, it's not huge to be honest, and we are outgrown in there. But for me, it was really important to be there because I feel those terms like sharing economy, circular economy have been like just taken over by Silicon Valley profit-driven corporations. And I think that having back, public sharing projects in the public space, it's a really important step because we reclaim back those terms, a real circular and sharing economy. It must be community-driven, it must be in person. And a lot of people, when I started, they said, oh, why don't you do a peer-to-peer app? Well, first of all, there are already 100 of them, but I always like to say that you can date and have a pizza through your app, but for your tools, you still have to show up. And I think that human connection is, the value of what we actually do. So obviously beyond the free rent that the state library gives us, for us, it was really important to bring back those conversations in the public space. We also organize workshops, as probably a lot of you do, like beeswax wraps making, introduction to power tools, bike repairing. And all these workshops are really, well, first of all, are really important to create community, but I'm 28 and I am the generation that grew up in this consumerist culture, right? And I should say that I'm the less skilled person in the entire tool library, and we have 60 plus volunteers. So, I realized that if we had all these amazing tools and resources and stuff, but we lacked of skills, and that's the problem in our society, right? There was a bigger gap to fill in there. So beyond recreating the community, workshop brings many other benefits. So I wrote down some here. Obviously, through workshop, people can access tools or try them for the first time or other items. It's a way to upskill the community, obviously, teaching them to repair and maintain things. It gives them transferable skills. So all the workshops that we try to organize have in mind that those people can go back in their community or in their families and then transfer those skills. And again, something really important, it builds self-confidence, because obviously if confidence lacks, then we don't repair or maintain and we just go and buy new things. And workshops really are the best way to overcome the alienation of the productivist and consumerist system. And through workshop and through our work, we also try to shift a bit the conversation. So I know I'm giving a lot of information here, and I hope that they they come out as coherent, but each of these aspects could actually be discussed much longer. So we try to, shift the conversation from waste, so how things and materials are removed from the economy, to disposability, how and why things enter, society to begin with. We also try to shift from dispossession, again, a relationship with waste, because again, there's a lot of greenwashing around waste and a lot of organization and working in there. But we try to talk to people and educate people about possession, a relationship with buying and owning things, which is a very culturally enrooted thing, that we have to own everything and we have to buy everything. We shift the conversation from consumerism, which Dennis, in his book Curing Affluenza, defines as the love of buying things, as the thrill that people get, those emotions that people get from buying things, to materialism. And I actually like his definition of materialism, because he says a real materialism is the love of maintaining the materials, the maintaining things, right? He adds that if we were really materialistic, we would care about the stuff and pass it to the next generation as we used to do it. And again, this is a way to reclaim back those terms and to try to see them from a different perspective. so why the communities are agent of change? Well, they are an important way to recreate the commons. What are the commons? Usually common people think our commons is a bunch of things that we put together and those things are the commons. Well, commons is much more, right? So by borrowing, we can reduce consumption and production because we give use rights. So those resources become commons when they have use rights attached to it, right? And to create and nurture those commons, we do need rules around them. We do need the agreed social norms. And with those resources and those social norms, then there is a shared responsibility. And that shared responsibility is what we can call a community. And this is very different from, maybe some of you heard about the tragedy of the common, which is still taught in many ecological and economics textbooks. But the tragedy of the common, as was explained many years ago, was saying basically humans don't know how to share resources. If we put their resources, everyone gonna free ride. Humans are greedy. That's why we need a neoliberal market that manages everything. But reality, what was lacking in that theory is that human can have shared a responsibility and a set of rules to manage the resources. So it's not just open access without any rules around it. But the important thing of the commons for me is the commoning, is the process of building those social relationships and valuing different the world around us, prioritizing different things around what we do in our daily life. So really the commoning is the reevaluation of human relationships and resource use that represent an opportunity to redesign society toward a socially just and ecologically sustainable society. So going back at the macro level, there's so much that we can do, and sometimes we fell into the trap of the non-choice. We like, oh, let's choose the less worst scenario or the less worst politician or the less worst situation. But really, I think these times require us to be brave and bold and to point out at the problem, but also to be bold in the propositions. So I think that there's many propositions out there in new economy movements, such as obviously the local economy, but local economy is not a matter of just a scale economies. Local economy need to be diverse, and I'm referring especially to local food systems, just because sometimes people say, oh, if we just have one crop locally, we can't feed the population. Well, it's not about that. Local economy need to be diverse. We might need an economy based on sufficiency, which basically means having production and consumption that they're need-based and not capital-driven only. We need obviously high quality user-oriented products. So that's a way to phase out of planned obsolescence. The right to repair is something that you might be aware of, that is a growing movement as well. Services and products should in theory integrate the costs, the real cost, and not externalize it in other countries or other populations. We can really push the new economy movement into much broader perspective. If I think that instead of GDP, we need to use other indexes. But for example, what if the welfare of a nation would be based on how much free time people have, rather than how much productive we are, right? And there are theories that shows that it can be done. So reduction in work or work sharing mechanism could be also something to adopt. Yes, renewable energy, we hear a lot about it, but I want to point out that we need to decrease the energy demand to begin with. What are we using that energy for, to produce what and for who? And there's a lot of other things that can be discussed in Europe, and I guess in the US as well. Some organizations push for a basic income, but too little we talk about income caps. So that's a different way to look at it. Extraction limit, commercial free zones. Public transport here still have private advertisement on it. Do we really want private advertisement on public assets and stuff? So, and obviously at the end, as I said, we could measure differently the prosperity of our economy with other indexes that look at different aspects of well-being. I put up here, and I'm more than happy to share my slides with you, some books if you're new to this, or if you want to look more into it, about degrowth, post-growth, or new economic theories. And here's some more. So as I said, the degrowth movement is actually growing. And I would like just to finish saying, well, we can't change our planet, for instance, but we can change the economy, and that's all what we can do. So we might just give it a try and see if it can be better than that. Thank you. Well.
And I think we're open for questions.
Sorry. Yeah, did you guys get all of that?
Hi, Sabrina. This is Neil from Vashon, Washington. And first of all, that was great. Thank you very much. Very impressive. I have a question just in terms of getting the level of volunteers that you have. It's we're in a small community. We only have 11,000 people here, and we don't have what I would say an active group of 60 volunteers. Have you done anything particular that you found most successful in garnering volunteerism to support your organization?
Yes, thanks for your question.
Yes.
Well, actually, it's really interesting because our volunteers have always been very engaged. And one day I wondered the same question, I asked myself, and I realized, and I was probably doing it in an indirect way. So first of all, we work in a very horizontal way. Obviously, at the beginning, I had to set up everything because I was alone, but everything is very horizontal. For example, we have an inventory manager, we have, event coordinator, we have other people, and I try really to delegate, or like everyone manages his own thing. I sometimes don't know what's going on, and I have to go to meetings, say, please brief me. And I think when people take ownership of their work and the responsibility, and they don't get told, what to do, or they don't have that feeling that it's my tool library or whatever. So that's one thing. The second thing, and it's always a work in progress, right? Because we are experimenting how to democratize and put even in a more horizontal way those systems of power. The second thing that I realized is that we actually support ourselves beyond the tool library. So for example, in this time of crisis, we were thinking, should we put a fund in so that those who have a job can, pay for those who don't have a job, or stuff like that. Those who have a job, sometimes they try to find a job for the others, and we really help each other beyond the tool library. And I feel that's where the community aspect comes in, because we are like, yeah, you're not just a person showing up and delivering a service to the tool library. You're actually a person, a human that I care of. So how can I help you? Do you need to move house this weekend? So I think that we grow up that, and we didn't know each other before. So showing that there is that support, that even financial when we can, but, just as a family really made people, feeling more feeling comfortable coming back. Also because we all know that sometimes they get casual jobs, or I'm doing a PhD full time. So we are like caring about each other, and we understand that if someone disappears for a few weeks, he or she gonna come back. So maybe that, but yeah, I don't know.
And Sabrina, that was awesome. I have a question. How would you say it's spreading across Australia? How do you feel the movement is doing in your country as a whole, I guess?
So it's definitely spreading, which is great. To be honest, and I like to be critiqued, because I think, we do need to be critiqued in order to grow and develop. We are not as collaborative as it seems in the US. So especially because we have like the legislation around tool libraries is really unclear, right? But then we are trying to fit within these hiring company and community groups and stuff. And what I'm seeing is that the lack of collaboration, and unfortunately maybe a little bit of competition, which is really a shame, is leading us to be slower at making an impact than what I would have wished for. But nevertheless, the movement is peaking. People actually know what a tool library is now, which before, maybe when I started, was completely new, even if there were already two around. The other thing I see as a problem is, as I said, this circular economy here is a big thing, but is a very big buzzword. And it might deviate from the actual, values that tool library bring. So that is something to bring back, on track. But yeah, it's definitely growing. And hopefully, what I really wish for Australia, for Queensland at least, is that the public system would actually include tool libraries as a normal public service.
I have a quick request. Can you show the second page of your reading list, please?
Sure. This one?
Thank you very much.
That's okay.
Sabrina, this is Christina from the West Seattle Tool Library, and we have been in existence for 10 years. And since day one, we've actually had too many tools and we have too many people donating to us. Have you run into that problem? And how is it that you deal with the donation of, I guess, essentially garbage that isn't really, I don't know if it's because you're going through those companies instead of, you know, individuals bringing tools, if that's less of an issue, but it seems like we spend a lot of time sorting through garbage.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yes, so luckily I'm not the one managing the inventory, because otherwise I would keep everything.
Yeah, I hear you.
It
It can always be fixed, right?
So no, but we do have those discussions all the time. So the thing is that we really desperately need a second place, because so at the moment we are volunteers, but I do think that we need to be financially sustainable at a certain point, and we can reach that eventually with a bigger place and having more members. So we're actually having enough tools now to set up already. We have everything ready to set up a second space. So for that small location we actually have people from 45 different postcodes, which means people sometimes are driving 30 minutes or even more to pick up a tool. So there's a high demand for that. But I do think because of the system in place, we can be more picky about what we let go, and we try to select just the higher standard stuff. But maybe for those in the makerspace there, or like people that are more creative, I do think that the future of tool library should be more standardized. I do think that it would help having a same brand or some kind of same items across the tool library, because it's really time consuming to really find spare parts or repair all the time different brands and different items. And that's where we as a movement, we should think a step forward, instead of always being back repairing old brands. But
yeah, I hear you. I definitely hear you on that. We have I think like 8 different brands of weed whackers, and it's sometimes we just have to check them because we can't get brushes for them or something like that,
Yeah.
Heather Teagarden, do you want to?
Parts. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Heather Teagarden, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I love this idea of degrowth, and I was trying to think about how, and thank you for the book references, so I'll start reading more. But how do I start talking about that, excuse me, especially to friends and family that sell items for a living?
Yeah, well, that's a good one. I think that there's 2 things in there that, I don't have a final answer to that. But the thing is, we don't want to blame the small businesses, right? So I imagine that, your friends, they might not be the big corporations that actually rule the world. And I think that that's an important part of the local economy, right? If we can actually support and promote them. And I think we have to look at the bigger pictures, like, well, who are, like in the food market, for example, there's those huge corporations, but I'm not saying, to the local small shop, don't sell your chips because we can live with that, right? So I think it's is like maybe looking at the scale of the economy, and if we need to start downscaling something, and those are the open question in the degrowth movement, is what do we need to downscale to begin with? What do we need to prioritize? Who needs to downscale and stuff? So it's not, stopping the economy from one day to the other, but some sector might still need to develop and some might need to restrain, and vice versa in different areas, in different regions, maybe within the US, some sectors still need that support and that growth, but some other need to downscale. So, but again, I like, and I see that it works when you actually explain how the current economy works, and then people realize it, and then from there you can open up the conversation.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
I had a question for you. I was curious about the testing of products. So we run a lot of repair events and also maybe have opportunities to partner with people who are throwing items away. And so I was just curious to hear a little bit more about how you have to get certified to use the products that would normally be thrown away.
Well, the certification is really at the moment just one to test and tag is a one-day thing. They explain you everything about electrical appliances, how to understand the resistance and to see if it's a double insulated item or not. But at the end of all that theory, you just have to purchase a very expensive $6,000 machine and plug in your items. Obviously, you need to find the metal parts and stuff. So there's a bit of a procedure in there so that you can see if the current is actually going through properly, is not overheating and stuff. And then the machine records the results, and then you need to put it in a software. So we use MyTurn as a software, but we also have another software which records all of that. And for example, one of our issues is because MyTurn doesn't have any test and tag feature yet, just saying to Jean, no. So we have those parallel softwares, but we have to keep records of our electrical appliances for 5 years. So we really have to be strict on checking that everything that went out and back has been tested and tagged. Again, I should say that the tool libraries around here are like the more community driven, that they're not in a government building. They just test and tag every 3-6 months. But we are trying really to maybe develop slower, but in a higher level, so that government is happy with what we're doing, so that they can then replicate it in other public spaces eventually. So a lot of community groups, they don't test and tag as per law as we are doing.